Oh, Zivi.
Whoa, that was some unbelievable. You were with Shlomo?
Yes, for Shlomo. We've started recording to see Shana.
Oh, great.
Wonderful.
Yes, we went to Menachem Oval, Rav. What was the Rav?
I think I saw a video from that on Shlomo's feed.
Yes, his name is Rav Garnot, and it was Aliyah Neshama Amitai Garnot. We have in mind for this class.
Amen.
His son. We also went to Menachem Oval Avia, another one. There were so many people when we went to Menachem Oval, and we ended up only by two places, but we tried to go to many, and it was very intense. The two we went to, one was in the Shomron and one was in Tel Aviv. And the one by Tel Aviv was Rosh Hashiva. There was intense singing and unusually it was beyond words. The women were crying all together in a huddle. It was very intense. So we should dedicate to have no more availers like this for young Jewish people. And the general Matzav, as Rav Mordechai Holtz wisely said, we need to have in mind all the defenders of Israel, and please God, we'll have an end to this war with victory.
Amen. We're going to talk about Netzach, as a matter of fact. We're looking at Parshat Noach, Josh Zion.
This is Rav Shimon Hermon. Hermon.
Yeah.
With a O, yeah. O-N.
Yeah. I don't have Vav, with a Vav. No, probably not. We Hebraicized it when we came. So it was Herman, but my wife and I are makbid on the name. Anyhow, we're looking at Parshat Noach, Josh Zion. We're going to be looking at two drushes, but as Zera Shimshon, we're looking at Josh Zion and Josh Chet, because I thought, normally when you're studying the Parshat Shiur around this time, you either focus on the Dora Mabel or you focus on the Dora Flaga, but generally you kind of miss one for the other. So Bezrat Hashem, tonight we're going to be looking at two drushes, one that covers each. And interestingly enough, they're going to both bring proofs from the Zera Shimshon is going to bring inyanim and proofs from Sanhedrin Perek Yud Aleph in both of them, and we're going to see an inyan of barrenness of akara across both of them. And Bezrat Hashem, it should be in the merit that we know no more sorrow, that our Chayalim Kedoshim are protected in the merit of our learning as they watch over us and protect us, and that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should grant us continued achdus and victory over our enemies.
Amen.
All right. Zion, Sanhedrin, Perek Yud Aleph, Vaishalach et Ha'orev. The Gemara in Sanhedrin, the 11th chapter of Sanhedrin, brings a pasuk from this week's parsha, Vaishalach et Ha'orev, and Noach sent out the raven. He sent out the raven the first of the three times that he would send out a bird. First he sent out a raven. The raven made a couple sibuvim around the teva and came back. Then he sent out a dove, and it went out. And then it came back and it didn't find a place to land. And the third time, so he actually sent out four times. The third time he sent out and it brought back an olive branch. The fourth time he sent out, it didn't come back. And at that point he knew that enough land had been found that the dove could settle. But this first time around, we're just talking about the raven, the Urev, that he sent it out and did a few sibuvim around the teva, and then it came back. So we have a Gemara, Amar Reish Lakish, where he's going to be he's gonna bring a parish on this pasuk. What does it mean? Teshuva nitzachas hashiv ha'uriv. The raven gave a winning answer to Noach. A teshuva nitzachas. What does this mean? He gave a winning answer. Amar lo. The raven said to him, Rabcha soneni. Hashem, your master, hates me. Ve'ata soneni. And you, Noach, you hate me. What does this mean? Rabcha soneni. Hashem hates me. She'amar likach mina teharim shiva umina tameim shtaim. Because he said, from the kosher birds, from the kosher animals, you should take 7. But from the non-kosher animals, you should only take 2. And I believe it's the Maharsha, I think it's the Maharsha that points out that from this we see that there was 7 zugim of the kosher animals, but in the case of 2, it wasn't 2 pair, but it was just 1 male, 1 female, 2 total. Because 7 you can't break down in that way, that it would be 7, 3 male, 3 female would be 6, 4 male, 4 female would be 8, so 7 it has to be zugim, but by the non-kosher animals, by the tameim, we see it was only zachar nekeva, as we're going to see further on. So we know, the raven says, Hashem hates me because he only brought 2 of me because I'm not kosher, but from the kosher ones he brought 7. Ve'ata soneni, and you, Noach, you hate me. She'ata sholeach mi min shnayim, because you're asking me to go out to see if the waters have subsided. Umaniach mi min shiva, and you leave the kosher animals, you're taking from the non-kosher animals. Im pagabi sar shel chama o sar shel tzina. If one of the angels of fire, one of the angels of chill should attack me, lo yehei olam chaser b'riyah. Wouldn't the world be lacking one of the species, one of the creations? Because if he was to go out and he was to be attacked by the ministering angel of fire or ice, then there wouldn't be any progeny left to the raven. He wouldn't be able to mate because he'd be dead, and there wouldn't be any left. As opposed to if he sent out a kosher animal, if that kosher animal was to be killed, so then there would be 6 others, and their progeny would be able to continue. But me, Noach, you send me out, so then if I'm to be attacked, then my progeny won't continue. V'od amar lo, and he gave another answer as well. Shema le'ishti ata tzarich, maybe you're sending me out that you want to cohabit with my wife. Amar lo, what does Noach say to him? Rasha. He says to the Orev, you're a Rasha, but muterli ne'esarli ba'asarli lo kol shekain b'chulei. And the Gemara finishes off, and Noach says, Orev, you're a Rasha. You think that my wife, who is normally mutter to me, but is made usher to me in this particular moment, so look, kol shekain, that your wife, the raven, which is always usher to me, so then when my own wife has been made usher, kol shekain, your wife will be usher to me. How could you think that I would cohabit with your wife? Mashmalan, you're a Rasha. By the way, what's the proof? It actually brings it in this very same Gemara right after this Gemara Breish Lakish. What's the proof that we know, in Minalan, that we know that Noach and his wife didn't cohabit? So the pasuk, when it says go up to the teva, say again.
That's after that they leave, when they leave.
Nachon. So when they go up to the teva, it says Noach uvanecha ishtecha v'neshei, right? So it says Noach and his sons, and then Noach's wife and his sons' wives. So you can almost see it like a procession, but the sons are in the way between Noach and his wife is in the way between his sons and his son wives. But when they go out from the teva, there's not that separation. It says Ata ve'ishtecha uvanecha v'neshei v'necha. So then we see that they're together. So in that way, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was matir that then they could be intimate. But when they were in the teva, Tash Mishamita was forbidden. So that's the source. It's brought in that very same Gemara right after this with no interruption. Makshim ha'olam. So we've got this Gemara of Rish Lakish to deal with now. And Makshim ha'olam, I haven't looked into these particular Rishonim that ask, but apparently many Rishonim ask this question on this Gemara. Lama lo teritz lo Noach klum ala kusher Rishona. The raven asks 2 kashas. The first kasha, you're sending me out, and for Kimus ha'olam, there needs to be myself and my wife, but if I'm to be struck down while I'm out, so then there won't be Kimus ha'olam because my progeny won't be able to continue. Kasha number 1. Kasha number 2, you're sending me out because you want to cohabit with my wife. What does Noach respond? Rasha, you really think I would cohabit with your wife when what's normally mutter to me is asur, so kol shekain, what's always asur to me is going to be more asur? But he doesn't respond on the first point. And many Rishonim comment on this. I think there are a few ways to answer it up. Zera Shimshon suggests one and immediately dispenses it. That's the first kasha. He doesn't answer to that one. And we're going to push away this idea that we can respond. You could think, Noach only answers the second kasha, and that's why we say that the raven has a teshuva nitzachas. Because Noach can't answer, right? So the raven wins. We're not going to be able to say that, because it's a very, very common kasha in the Gemara. Whenever you have a Tana or an Amora that brings a reason, and then they say Devar Acher, another reason. So the Gemara will almost always ask, why do you have to bring a Devar Acher? Wasn't your first argument good enough? Generally speaking, if you have a strong enough argument, you don't need to bring a second argument, right? So in this case, we see that the raven brought 2 arguments. So what? Was your first argument not strong enough that you had to bring a second one? So it's not going to be called the Tshuva Nitzachas. Right? We need to come up with some other reason why Noach was only responding to the second kasha and not to the first one. Everyone with me? Yeah, we all got it? Cool. Excellent. Nearly teretz. So the Zera Shimshon is going to go ahead and answer. And by the way, I think there are a few other ways to answer. I didn't see too deeply in the Rishonim, but I think the Maharsha brings a Re'em that says that a tshuva nitzachas, it doesn't just mean an answer that's winning, but netzach you can also say is eternal, right? Netzach netzachim. So when Noach saw that the raven was doing a few sibuvim and then came back, so he saw, so the waters are still going on as if netzach netzachim is still going on forever. So therefore it was a tshuva nitzeches. It was an answer that was bringing back this news that the waters extended. I believe that the Maharsha brings that Re'em. I'm not 100% sure. It could just be that I was chadish that as a possible answer. But hikshim ha'olam, if you go and look into the sugya, there will be other answers that come up. The Zera Shimshon is going to give us his teretz, the way that he answers it up. Near literitz. The inachinami shenoach tiretz lo af hakushya harishona. We've been thinking about it wrong. We're going to say that his answer was actually his way of answering the first question. How are we going to say that? We're going to say the raven wasn't actually really good at formulating these kinds of questions. And for that reason, he actually brought him 2 kashas, because he wasn't that good at asking kashas. So we brought him 2 poor kashas instead of 1 really bomb kasha. And it was going to be a 2-parter. And he's going to bring him first the first part and then the second part. But really, it's 1 kasha altogether. And you can bring 1 teretz that's going to work for both of them. Aval. And this is what Noach does, and we're going to see how Noach is answering both kashas with 1 teretz. Aval im havayodei lehagshad. But if the raven did know how to formulate logical questions in a way that was really, really good, lo havamakshei le ela kasha achas bilvad. He wouldn't have been able to solve. Lo havamakshei le ela kasha achas bilvad. He would have asked only 1 kasha and not 2. He would have had 1 really good kasha and not 2 poorer kashas. And this is what Rish Lakish is talking about. He says that teshuva nitzachas, if he had asked the really great kasha, it would have been a kasha that you wouldn't have been able to answer. It would have been a teshuva nitzachas. Bli teirutz, bli shum teirutz, that he wouldn't have been able to answer. So that's going to be, we're going to see in the rest of the drasha. The Zera Shimshon is going to lay out how the 2 kashas that the raven asks are really 1 kasha. That Noach was really answering both kashas that was like a 2-parter of a 1 kasha with 1 teretz. That was all that was needed and all that was appropriate. And that if the raven had known how to ask a great kasha, that Noach wouldn't have been able to answer it. There wouldn't have been any answer. So what does the Orev say? Let's start from the beginning again, and we're going to reframe this whole thing according to what the Zera Shimshon has laid out. Mitchila amar lo ha'orev. So the Orev says to Noach, Im paga bisar shalchama, if the ministering angel of fire comes to me, the ministering angel of tzina, nimsa sheha'olam chaser b'riyah. The world is going to be lacking a creation. Ve'alze haya yachol Noach l'taretz. But Noach could have answered to this. The raven's worried. His progeny is not going to be continued because he's going to be hit with chamar. He's going to be hit with sinna. So what could Noach say? Adraba, im haya sholech mimin shiva haya efshar. If I'd sent out from one of the kosher species, then it would have been possible that they could have been struck down. How do we say? She'im yifka bahem sar shalchama v'chula yamutu, lefi she'ein bahem sorech le'olam. They could have been struck down and killed by the sar shalchama and the sar shaltzina, because they're not really needed for the kiyum ha'olam. V'nimsa she'oso haminyan shal shiva haya chaser echad. Because the 7 kosher animals would have been lacking 1, there still would have been 6, and therefore their progeny would have continued. But if I send out one of the 2 non-kosher ones that are needed for the world, because if you're lacking 1, then you won't be able to continue. Then they're not going to be able to attack you at all. Why? HaKadosh Baruch Hu yishmereim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to protect you.
So what the Zera Shimshon is basically saying is the answer that there's no reason to give an answer to the first question because it's a foolish question.
It's not that it's a foolish question. We'll see that the Orev brings foolish questions. Right?
No, I'm saying, but the question really is like what you're thinking of it like there's only 2, so 1 out means that there's no continuation.
Right.
What Noach could have easily answered saying basically is the opposite. If we had 7 and now we have 6, it's no big deal. But if you have 2, it's more of a guarantee.
In other words, that which you're so worried about, that your species is going to be wiped out because you're one of 2, is the very reason that you won't be wiped out.
Right.
Because without you, there's not going to be a kiyum ha'olam, and a HaKadosh Baruch Hu has a vested interest in kiyum ha'olam. He needs you, right? And for that reason, you're going to be protected, right? Kedei sheyiskam also hamin ba'olam. That min is going to be continued. So that very reason, or that you were worried, is going to be the reason actually that Kadosh Baruch Hu is going to take care of you. Okay, mishum hachi hosif. So the Orev, in theory, right, if Noach had answered like this, the Orev would have been like, okay, I'm masking. But I'll add on, shema le'ishti atatzarich. Now, initially, when we heard this argument, it's kind of a crass argument. What's the kesher between them, right? It doesn't make any sense. Like, oh, you're just sending me out because you want to cohabit with my wife. But really, we're going to see that this is the same kasha. It's the same worry about my progeny is not going to...
Makes sense.
How so?
Because but the whole underlying question is, how do I continue? In other words, I'm concerned that the Orev species is not going to continue. So it's either I'm not going to be alive and therefore there's no continuation, or he and Noach and the wife, female raven, are going to continue without me. But either way,
But what's the problem with that? I go out, I come back.
No, he's saying is if I get killed by the Tsar or whatever.
No. It's a different reason now. The first reason was, I could get killed and then there won't be a Kiyum Sa'olam.
No,
The second
it's the
reason.
same question. It's the same question.
It's not.
He's saying that the raven,
Right,
a female raven, if it would cohabitate with Noach, this is what the accusation is, then the species would be a different species coming from him, and it wouldn't be the same species as if the raven and the raven.
Right, exactly. So
it's the same thing as you're saying.
I hear, but that's not what the Zera Shimshon speaks of. There's not a concern that Abraham and the Bas Zug of the raven are going to go on and continue the species, and it's going to be a different man. That's not the concern. The concern, it's like Pshat. It's a different concern. It's not a concern about progeny. And we're going to see that the Zera Shimshon says, Le'olam, it really is a concern about progeny. But Pshat is, you're sending me out so you can be with my wife behind my back. And then when I come back, then I'll be with my wife again and the progeny will continue. Right? So it's two different concerns. But the Zera Shimshon is going to be mashlim them that it should be Le'olam one concern, and that concern is one of progeny. So what does he say? Mishum hachi hosif, shema le'ishti atatzarich. Maybe it's you just want to be with my wife for your own taiva. Kilomar. This is the explanation. Dilma, now, Noach, I'm accusing you that you're not really concerned about progeny, and therefore the following can stand. Right.
No.
The Zera Shimshon goes on, we'll see inside, because he says that this point is hevel b'shtus, like absolutely unfounded, and this is why Noach responds like he does. We'll see. Maybe you're not really worried about the continuation of the world at all. Maybe you just want to cohabit with my wife. And for this reason, you sent me out. And if you're intimate with my wife, she's going to become barren. Where do we know this from? We know it from a Gemara in Avodah Zarah. Say again. What? The wafers are not—they're not good.
They're stale.
They're stale. How about? I brought a cake. If anyone wants it, it's a honey cake from Rosh Hashanah that we froze, and we've been needing to go through it. And I thought that we would all enjoy it here.
No, cookies.
Okay. So what do we? So the raven on its surface, this is just an accusation of you just want to send me away to do your own taiva. I'm not buying it. But really, it's a concern about progeny. Why? Because maybe Noach, you're not really concerned with the kiyum ha'olam. And if you're not concerned with the kiyum ha'olam, then you'll cohabit with my wife, and my wife will become barren. How do we know that when human beings cohabit with animals, the animals become barren? From the third parak of Avodah Zarah, here's the situation. You want to bring a korban to the Beis HaMikdash, so you go to the market to buy a cow. In the market, there are lots of goyim, and the goyim are saying, buy my cow. The question is, if a goy cohabits with his animal, that animal becomes puzzled to be a korban. You can't bring that animal. Do you have to assume that the goy cohabited with his animal because goyim don't have morals, or at the very least they didn't in the time that we were concerned about? So do we have to have that concern or not? And the answer is no. Why don't we have to have that concern? Because a Nachri is going to be worried that his behemoth shouldn't become teyakar, that it shouldn't become barren. Why? Because there's parnasa in that, right? You want your cow to have calves in order that you can raise them, and you'll have milk and meat and cows to sell to Yidden as korbanos, right? So that's a parnasa for you. And if you're with your animal, then your animal is going to become barren. So says the goy, all right, so I'm not going to do that. And because we think, we understand that the goy is going to prioritize his parnasa, we do not have to assume that in a case where we're buying a potential korban from the market, that possibly it's puzzle because the goy was with it. We all understand this far? Excellent. So, Nachri chasal behemto shelo teyaker, ve'az, afilu shelo yadikuni, sar shel chama, or sar shel tzina. So even if I go out, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to protect me from the Sar Shel Chama and the Sar Shel Tzina, like you were saying earlier, Noach, and I return here, anyway, even though I wasn't killed while I was out there, the Olam is still going to be lacking a Bria. Why? Yamituni, thank you. That it's going to kill me. Why? I'm going to come back. Noach, you're going to have cohabited with my bas zug. She's going to be barren. And anyway, even if I were to come back without being harmed, then I'm still not going to be able to have progeny, and I'm still not going to be able to continue onwards. And therefore, for that reason, I have to be concerned that anyway, while I'm out, I might get killed by the Sar Shalchem and the Sar Shaltzena, because there's no reason for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to protect me, because the second that you made my wife barren by cohabiting with her, there was no reason for him to protect me. And therefore, the Sar Shalchem and the Sar Shaltzena can get me. So your first argument, Noach, doesn't really work. We all understand? So what does Noach say? This is the teretz that answers both kashas. Noach teretz lo Rasha. He says to him, "You're a Rasha, but mutter li bechulei im kein efshar she'ani yashameshi mishtacha." If I'm not going to be with my wife, who's normally mutter to me, but in the case of the teva is usher to me, then for sure I'm not going to be with your wife, who's always usher to me, and in the case of the teva is kol shekein usher to me. And that which you should think that I would ever be with your wife is hevel v'shtus, and you're a Rasha. Umei hatamzeh efshar nami shesar shachama yifga becha mipnei kiyum ha'olam v'chen yiskalia. And therefore, because this concern of ulai ishtiya tatzarich is really very silly, and Noach says it's a foolish concern, so therefore you don't really have to be concerned about the Sar Shalchem and the Sar Shaltzena. So that's Noach answering up both of his kashas with one teretz, because it's really the same kasha. The kasha is, I'm concerned about my progeny, and if my progeny is not going to go forward, then I can get attacked by the Sar Shalchem and the Sar Shaltzena. So that's Noach answering up with both. Very, very nice, but we still have a problem. What's the problem? Noach won the argument. So how can Reish Lakish say that the Orev that it's a tshuva nitzachas? Because Noach won, right? So amnam tshuva zo eino teshuva haguna rak lefi devarav shel ha'orev shehoshif lo shema leishti v'chule. It really only beats that first, that second argument that he brought. Maybe you're going to be with my wife. He was worried about really very silly matters. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Grab a sefer. Oh, nice. He was really worried over very, very silly matters. Because if he'd known the truth, lo haya lo tzarech lazeh. The hayamrinan beperek diksuvos hakol b'yedei hashemayim chutz mitzinim pachin. So what are we going to see? We're going to see that if the Orev had actually known how good a kasha he had, he wouldn't have needed the second one. So let's forget about this whole argument that he was Mosif. The first argument was, if you send me out and I get hit by the Sar Shalchem and the Sar Shaltzena, then we're not going to have my progeny continuing onwards, and that's going to be a problem for the Kiyumas HaOlam. And Noach says, well, for exactly that reason, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to protect you in order to preserve the Kiyumas HaOlam. But the Raven didn't know the emes. He didn't know that he could ask a Bam Kasha on this. By saying, because we have a Gemara in Kesufas that says, Hakol b'idei shemayim chutz mitzinim hapachim. The only thing that's not in control of heaven is fire and chill and fire, tzinim pachim. And therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wouldn't have been able to protect him from the Sar Shalchem and the Sar Shaltzena, and the Raven really would have been wiped out. That would have been a problem. Ve'in hachinami shehaya yachol lamush mipnei achamo atzina. He could have really been wiped out from this. Af al gav sheyesh bo tzarech l'kiyum ha'olam. Even though there was a need for him, and even though, do you want to say it? No.
He's got to say.
Okay, marvelous. Even though that there was a need for his progeny to continue, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he wants to protect him, he says, what can I do? Hakol b'yedei shemayim chutz mitzarim pachim. There's nothing I can do about it. Amen. Af al gav sheyesh bo tzarech l'kiyum ha'olam umishum hachi. And from this we see that it was actually a very specific thing he said. It wasn't anything else. It was Sar Shalchem and Sar Shaltzena. And not something else. Why? Because Hakol b'yedei shemayim chutz mitzinim pachim. And if it had been an anus acher, then Kiyumas HaOlam HaKadosh Baruch Hu would have protected him because of Kiyumas HaOlam. Ach mitzinin pachim ein lo takana im yivgu bo. He wouldn't have had any remedy if he had been attacked by the Sar Shalchem and the Sar Shaltzena. V'zeu de'amar Reish Lakish teshuva nitzachas reshiv ha'orev l'Noach. And this is why Reish Lakish says it's a winning kasha, because there's really no tshuva. So what do we see from here? Right? L'maisa. we all see in our lives, and maybe we're these people, and sometimes we're always these people, even if we're very smart and we know how to formulate arguments. But sometimes we see that people have really emistic things to say. They have really good arguments to offer, but the way in which they offer them is actually not so well structured and not so well formulated, and therefore the truth gets lost. So that's our Uriv here. He actually had a good kasha that Noach wouldn't have been able to be mataris to. But he didn't formulate it very well. He split it up into this weaker two-part kasha that wasn't really alsalo. It didn't work for him. And Noach was able to present, even though the raven had the winning argument, Noach was able to beat him seemingly, right? So in our lives, what we want to do is, first of all, we want to be very, very clear with ourselves. There's like a lot of practical advice here, right? Better to offer one argument that's stronger instead of two arguments that are weaker. So that brevity is the soul of wit. And we can have a real understanding that the less we say, the more impact and power our words have. And also when we see other people that aren't necessarily so good at speaking out what they have to say, that we can recognize and we can learn from them and we can try and help them bring out the emes in their words. And we can help them with that, in order that we can learn from them and they can learn from themselves how to better speak things out. So, Bezrat Hashem, we should all learn, in the merit of our learning, we should be able to speak out better all of these ideas, these inyanim, and we should, Bezrat Hashem, learn from the Uriv, what not to do, in order that we can have a tshuva nisachas le'olam v'ad. Okay, so that's the first drasha, and I thought that we could stop in the middle a little bit, and we could do a little niggin, a little something. Yeah. Okay.
It reminds me a little bit like it's different, but it reminds me of like Esav asking his questions. What did he ask Yaakov?
Not sure.
About tithing salt.
Right. It was like these oh, my kid's so he's so frum. He's worrying about these things it doesn't need tithe.
Oh yeah.
Right. It's like it feels like it's a similar.
His intentions were right, or at least it came across as being right, but they were not necessarily formulated right. In other words, you're asking a silly question, but maybe what's underneath there is a good question.
Sure.
Right. So like the question of Asa, in this case, what you're saying is like Asa was asking a good question. Like his question was coming for the right reason. Unfortunately, it wasn't accepted right.
Yeah, we see that all the time.
It's more like the raven knew enough Gemara, so to speak, to know.
Hey, he's like, look at me! I brought this Gemara in Avodah.
Those dudes, with fire and with ice, you don't have shlita. So I really, it could happen.
Yeah.
He knows enough to.
But he didn't bring.
No.
That's the problem. He didn't bring that Gemara. He brought the Gemara in Avodah. He didn't bring the Gemara in Ksubos at Kol B'nei Shemayim Chutz Mitzin in Pachim.
So he should.
If he'd been a real mazmid, if he'd known enough, then he could have made that argument. So that's another nafkamina for us, is we have to be bakim, we have to be masmidim, we have to sit and just go learn and cover ground and learn for ourselves, because the more we know.
The arguments that are being made against us a lot of times are not founded. Most of the time are not founded, and most of the people who take or take what for face value, they use that information against us. Unfortunately, they don't really know what's going on.
Whenever I'm not here to
good proof about what happened yesterday, right?
Yeah. So, wait, what happened yesterday?
With the hospital, they didn't before they even
I'm not holding. What's happening?
Yeah.
What happened yesterday?
Oh, that's crazy.
Basically, there was a rocket that was misfired out of Gaza, and there was a rocket misfired out of Gaza, and within minutes, basically the entire world said, "Oh, it came from Israel." Within minutes.
I did hear about this.
That's what they said.
They shot the rocket at us, and it properly boomeranged around and hit their own hospital, which is why you should never buy your rockets from Australia.
But the point.
But they said that it hit the hospital,
right?
Even though it didn't.
But the point is that the people took it for face value right away, without any information, without any knowledge, and then they're just like.
But then the damage is done. It doesn't even matter if the information.
Yeah, there's been crazy riots all in different countries, and.
But the point is that we could have, had they taken a few minutes to really understand and really
the Jews.
Right, and then so what did the Israelis do? They gave him. They took an extra couple of minutes, and they gave him a recording saying one guy recorded. They found it. They listened.
That was so brilliant.
Yeah, they tapped into the phone lines. They didn't want to do it. They didn't want to release the video, the recording for obvious reasons. They released the recording, and the recording proves these two guys are talking, saying, "Oh, it hit the hospital." What do you mean?
There's still people who.
Right.
They've also got radar.
Right. No, of course
intelligence from the US.
Of course they have that stuff, but the voice recording is what's so much more valuable.
Again,
people don't.
Anyway,
one of my. It's pasha, yeah, but information is the remedy to ignorance. Right. The more you know, the more you know.
Only if your mind is open.
Nachon.
And hard.
Yeah, I've watched a few YouTube videos that says like, let me explain the Israeli-Palestinian conflict to you. In 1947, and you know, I'm not here to pass them for anyone how they should think and feel and have hashkafa on our current situation, but if you're starting your history of Israel in 1947, you're probably missing the clues. There's a lot more. There's a lot more. Okay. Yeah. Nachamu nachamu ami yom Elokeichem. 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 Oh, nachamu nachamu ami yom Elokeichem. Nachamu nachamu ami yom Elokeichem. Nachamu nachamu ami yom Elokeichem. Nachamu nachamu ami yom Elokeichem.
So Shlomo said today in the car on the way back, or Shlomo Katz, that the fact that we sang a nigun, two nigunim, in a bass oval, which I've never seen before in my whole life.
I saw that and I didn't want to say anything, but I saw it in the video. I was very surprised because
I've never seen it before in my life. And I'm not one to comment how Bialacha, especially whatever, they're way bigger than me. So his Nakuda was that
you were showing him? You asked him?
No, I didn't ask him in the halacha. I just sat and listened. I was here. I did ask other questions, but not in that. What I asked him, what I didn't ask him, what I listened to was his reaction to the experience, and he mentioned the power of nigunim for our generation, song, that it's really the most impactful way to affect our generation. And the Rosh Hashiva there, he is like the mashpia that Makad Aviata Bonai and other famous Balit Shuvas singers. Probably a long list. I don't know them all, but so someone like Aviata Bonai is a very big impact now on our generation. So I think the fact that they sang in the Nigunim was very pointful that they in this situation we need all the chizuk we can get. I think that would be the svara.
So there's a Gemara in Brachas Daf Vav. Ahmed Aleph, I think. It's Tanya Abba Binyamin, Amar Abba Binyamin, Ein Tefillah Shel Adam Nishmas Ela Bebeis Knesset. And the proof that he brings, Shne'emar, Vayishma El Harina Ve'ela HaTefillah. And so there's different questions, there's different perushim that are given over by the Rishonim about what this pasuk from Malachim is coming to explain that your tefillah is not heard except in a Beis Knesset. And they say, because a Beis Knesset is a Makom Shel Rina. Right, Yishma El Harina Ve'el HaTefillah. But the Gra brings this very interesting idea that Rina is referring to Limud HaTorah. And there are many. There's a pasuk in Vayelech that goes on this. Ve'ata kisfu lachem hashira hazo, something along those lines. You should write it down for yourselves. Vilamda, and you should teach it to your children. You should teach it to your descendants. Lasim, you should put it in their mouths. This shira. So my good friend Aaron David Pemensky was mechadish. I asked him what the source was. He says I haven't found a source yet, but he was mechadish this idea that the three best ways to be koneh Torah are brought about in this pasuk. You write it, and you teach it, and you sing it. And so what does it mean you sing it? So I connected it with this beautiful idea that my Rosh Hashiva with Noach Weinberg, Zichrono Livracha, gave over, He's got this beautiful 6-part series that's like 6 to 8 hours long, like a Lakewood seminar on Kiruv that he gave. It's on Torah anytime. It's really kedai. But he talks about the 7 main reasons that people come to Yiddishkeit. So he says there's a pragmatic reason, like, oh, this is a really good life and it's been around a long time and it's really working. And sort of, that the Torah just says so many incredible things in it. It's a pele. It couldn't have been written by anyone except for the Borei Olam, and people come to it for that. But he says the hardest one to demonstrate, that you really have to feel it for yourself, is this sort of experiential reason. And this is the way he explains it. He says if you take someone who's not a Ben Torah, that they don't have a connection to Yiddishkeit, you bring them into a Bet Midrash. And someone, some guy in a white shirt, with tzitzis, has just sat down with a sefer or whatever, some guy. So you say to the fellow next to you who doesn't really have a kesher to Yiddishkeit, you say, look at that guy over there. He's just cracked open a book. So if you watch him long enough, it might take 5 minutes, might take 10, 20 minutes, an hour, 3 hours. But he's going to start shifting back and forth a little bit. He's doing a little dance, right? He's going to start mumbling, whatever. But eventually, you're going to see he's going to start singing. Because when you're Oisik B'Torah, it brings out the song that's already within you. And that's an experiential thing that we all want to connect to the shira that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has already put in our mouths, that we were lomed from even before we were born, or even before we were born. It's like something that we're remembering as opposed to learning for the first time. And it's a very special thing that it's not a seichelic thing to say to a person, right? You have to really experience it. That's why it's hard to demonstrate. But I love this idea of Torah as Rina. And it's something that Baruch Hashem in the Machon Zimrat we're really exploring. Hence the name Zimrat Haaretz, right? So it's good. Torah is good. I'm sure it's a chiddush.
We're going to do another drush in the Zera Shimshon.
We're going to do drush chet.
Oh,
You're going to go?
okay. Thank you, Zevi, for being here.
Thank you for being here.
Come back soon.
Sorry for the stale stuff. We'll have to wait for the
Next
fresh.
week.
Yeah.
The
Charles
Torah is fresh. The food is not.
Charles next week, Bezrat Hashem is going to shuck the cow like 2 hours before we come. He's going to do the whole thing.
I'll just look at it and it'll get shucked.
Next week. It's the your side of the Batzayim.
Batzayim now.
Is it your side of the
Next
Batzayim?
week.
No, next week.
Oh, that's a special yahrzeit. I remember a Biederman has something about
I
Sudas.
can attest the fact that learning it really does bring you through. I can personally attest to it.
It was a Sadik in Svat, yeah? Wow.
When I was living in Spat, I would walk by his Beit Knesset all the time.
Oh.
All the time. Okay.
Amazing
Yalla.
choice.
So that was on the Dor Hamabel. And this is going to be on the Dor Flaga. Medrash Vayehi Chol Haaretz Safa Echad Udvarei Machadim. We have this pasuk that the Bereshit Rabbah is going to bring us. And the whole world was of one language and of unified words. She'amru Dvarim Chadim al Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. So the Medrash is doing kind of a funny thing here where we're talking about Dvarim Achadim. So it's saying Dvarim Chadim al Achadim, right? Sharp words on those that we describe as being one. So who's that going to be? Dvarim Chadim al Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. The al Echad Haya Abraham Ba'aretz, which is a pasuk from Yeshayahu.
What's that?
Echad Haya Abraham Ba'aretz, I think is a pasuk from Yeshayahu. It's a pasuk from Nach, but Abraham is described as Echad. So what is it that the people in the Dor Flaga said? Amru, Abraham pirda akara ve'eno molid. Abraham is a barren mule who can't give birth. Huh? Isn't it Chazkel? This guy, yeah, it's a good thing. Yeah. It's like, where'd you find that quote? It's like, in the Sifrei HaKadosh. Sefaria. We have this pasuk. Al Echad Haya Abraham Ba'aretz. So Hashem's described as Echad. Abraham's described as Echad. So they attack them both, saying what? Amru Abraham pirda akara ve'eno molid. Abraham is a barren donkey, and he can't give birth. Ve'al Hashem amru lo kol hemenu sheyover lo es ha'elyonim. Adkan Lashono. It's not fitting that a Kadosh Baruch Hu should have the upper worlds for himself. Until here are the words of the Medrash. V'hutamua, this is weird, says the Zera Shimshon. This is crazy, this is wondrous, it's a pele, it's weird, let's explore it, let's be medayik. What exactly is their intention with connecting a Kadosh Baruch Hu and Avraham Avinu? Lomar me Hashem ve'af me Abraham yachad. He put them together. Ve'od. So second question. First question: why put Abraham and Kadosh Baruch Hu together? Second question: Ma hu zeh she'amru Abraham pirda akara. What a strange thing to call Abraham. He's a barren mule. It's a strange comment.
Abraham wasn't even in the Parshat yet. Like, so.
Well, Abraham Avinu was alive at the time. He was 43 years old at the time of the Dora Flaga.
Right.
And he was barren. He was barren at the time.
43.
He was 43.
I'm 43 now. Interesting. Rav Shlomo also. You're also 43?
Yeah.
I was thinking Rav Shlomo is also 43.
Wow.
Same age.
Baruch Hashem. Something about the Shir's David Gehil is very youthful. You can't tell.
Oh, that's nice. Thank you.
Yeah. I was just bar mitzvah last week. Okay. Okay, so we got two kashas, yeah? Kasha number one. Or shaila, I guess. Kasha, shaila, something. We're asking, why do the people of the Dora Flaga, they said, why did they put Avram Avinu and HaKadosh Baruch Hu together? Very nice, you're saying, Devarim chadim al echadim. But why put them together? And what a strange thing to call Avraham, Pir de Akara.
Why Avraham specifically? He could have added other people too.
So that's going to be the question, right? Why put HaKadosh Baruch Hu
why
and Avraham?
Avraham only, and not like other people down the line?
We're going to see.
Oh, okay.
We're going to see. Why Dafka Hashem and why Dafka Avraham? So we're going to see. Okay, Ve'isa be'perek Yud Aleph de Sanhedrin, which was our last Gemara of Reish Lakish in the Uri, V'shalach Esat Uri. It was also in Yud Aleph Sanhedrin. This is, I actually think it's one Amud later, that the previous one was on Kuf Ches Amud Beis, and this one is on Kuf Tes Amud Aleph. Nechlekulu shlosha kisos. The Dor HaFlaga that built up Migdal Bavel, they were split up into three groups, each with their own intention of why they wanted to bring up Migdal Bavel. Achas Omeris Na'lev Eshiv. Let's go up and live at the top of the tower. Ve'achas Omeris Na'lev Nasim Milchama. Let's go up there and let's wage war. He doesn't bring the third group because he doesn't talk about it, but the third group is Na'lev and Naseh Zera. So we have three groups. Number one, let's go up and live there. Number two, let's go up and wage war. Number three, let's go up and do Avodah Zarah. Zo she'omeris nas v'neshiv hafitzam Hashem. The ones that said we're going to go up there and live, Hashem scattered them over the world. V'zo she'omeris na'lev v'naseh milchama. The ones that said we're going to go up and wage war, nasu kufin sheidim elilin. He turned them into monkeys and demons. Wow. Right? Sheidim, Rashi says, have the features of man, but are like malachim, but demons. And Lilin look like men, but they have wings. Weird. He talks about it there in Sanhedrin. You can see further also in Nida Daf Nun Daled, Nun something. You can see in Sanhedrin he cites it. And then Kufin, we all know are monkeys. Adkan. So until there is the Gemara. And incidentally, that third kita, that third group that says Nalu and Naseh Avodah had their languages all confused, right? So we had three groups. One was scattered everywhere all over the world. One was turned into monkeys and demons. And the third one had their language confused. And Hidafka chose the group that was going to go up and do Avodah Zarah to have their language confused in order that they couldn't go back and communicate to do Avodah Zarah together. So those were the three groups, and those were their three respective punishments. Ad kan. V'yesh ledaktek. Let's look into it. Dema inyan shena'asu kufin. What's the reason that the ones that were going up to wage war were turned into kufin? What's the connection between these two things? You want to go up and do war against the Kadosh Baruch Hu, so then we're going to turn you into monkeys. Like, what is this, War of the Planet of the Apes or something? It's not. It doesn't make sense. So we're going to talk about it. The Teretz Harav Baal Yafei Torah, who is the number one commentator on the Medrash, is the Baal Yafei Torah, and he brings the following: Shehakas she'amru na'aseh milchama. The group that said we're going to go up, we're going to wage war. Hayu choshvim leharid shefa aleihim behechrech. They said we're going to bring down shefa upon us, abundance, plenty. We're going to take it by force, right? How are they going to do that? By the natural governing forces of heaven, we're going to take down shefa. Al yedei by way of our physical force, our preparations, right? Hachana. We're going to take the shefa, we're going to bring it down upon ourselves. But alkein haya anshim shenasu kufin velilin. And for that reason, they return into monkeys and demons. Why? Because they lack Yitzira. They lack a certain life force, like an aspect of being Yotzer b'Kadosh Baruch Hu. Yetzirah b'Kadosh Baruch Hu. V'lo yachlu lehashlim atzmam liyod b'derech ha'anashim. And once you're a monkey or once you're a lilin, you're not going to be able to be mashlim yourself that you should be like a person again. You're just going to be permanently deficient. And for sure, you're not going to be able to bring down shefa bracha upon yourself. At that point, you're just stuck. So not only can't you get yourself to a level of being a regular person, but you definitely can't get yourself to a level of having shefa bracha min hashamayim. So mina keneged mina, because you sought out a higher madriga, I brought you to a lower madriga. Ad kan l'shono. That's what the Bal Yafei Torah says. What does the Zera Shimshon think of the Bal Yafei Torah? Karov leferusho hayanir lamar. I think it's pretty good. It's pretty close to what I would say. But we're going to sharpen the nakuda a little bit. Because they did want to bring down shefa tova bracha upon themselves, but whereas the Bal Yafei Torah says al yedei hachnosheim, by way of their manipulation, their physical trying to reach up and grab it, we're going to say bechishufeim. We're going to say bechishufeim. What's chishufeim? Sorcery. They're trying to reach, right? So by way of sorcery, we're going to conquer Shemayim. We're going to bring down shefa bracha tova aleinu. Afilu neged ritzono shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Even if Hashem doesn't want it that way, very strange. Hashem does not want the sorcery to triumph in Shemayim. So even if Hashem doesn't want the sorcery to triumph in Shemayim, still the sorcery is going to triumph. How can we understand that HaKadosh Baruch Hu can't beat sorcery? HaKadosh Baruch Hu ain't no mavado, right? We're going to see this idea is going to be brought further. The beperak kama de chulin, we see in the Gemara in Chulin amrinan einod milvado. Afiluk shafim. There's nothing besides him, even sorcery. Sorcery's not going to beat him. How do we know? Hachi itta dehavaka mehadra lemishkal afra mitute kere de Rabbi Chanina. There was once upon a time, there was a sorceress who was trying to pull out the dirt from underneath Rabbi Chanina's feet, aka she was trying to kill him. Amar la, what did Rabbi Chanina say? Shkali, go on, try it. Give me your best shot, yeah? Why is that? Lo mistaya milsich, your plan's not going to work. Einol milvado ksi, because the pasuk saying einol milvado, and like a Gemara says, afiluk shafim. So we see from this Gemara, right, that we have the sorceress who's trying to conquer over Rabbi Chanina. She's trying to kill him. He says, go on, I'm not afraid of you. Why? Because einol milvado, there's nothing besides Hashem. Even your sorcery isn't going to work. So then how could we say that there's this whole idea of sorcery is going to go ahead and conquer, right? They're going to try and take on heaven. So we have this idea that Rabbi Yochanan brings down. He says, wait a minute, Rabbi Chanina, slow your roll there. Ha'amar Rabbi Yochanan, lama nikra shmam kshafim. Why is it called kshafim? Shemachishim pemalia shel mala, because it beats the heavenly decrees that are up there in heaven.
Or it tries to. It's a try.
No, it beats them. It doesn't try. It succeeds. That's.
Machishim is not. It's not that it's successful. It's that it's undone. It's negating. It's not necessarily. It's Machishim is right. What did we say? Right at the end of Rabbi Shmuel, right? Machishim zeh. They contradict each other.
Yeah.
So it's not that they're trying to defeat. They're just trying to do is disprove, basically.
Sure, but say machshishim zeh, but one stands a chance against the other. That's the point. HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not bevadai, swat down Shufim. Like Shufim has a chance. Sorcery can actually beat HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We're saying there's some way in which that can happen.
Maybe that's not how I would do it, but okay, whatever.
Look in the Gemara and talk to me about it. This is how I understood it, but it's possible I'm wrong. But this is the claim, right? Right? Why is it called Shufim? Because you can actually make a claim that the sorcery could possibly conquer over HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the heavenly dinim. So then, Rabbi Chanina, how could you possibly say, go on, give me your best shot? Because maybe the sorcery is going to win, and maybe you're going to be killed. That's going to be a problem. Shiny Rabbi Chanina, but Rabbi Chanina is going to be different. Why? Because he had a lot of merit. So it seems like we're establishing a rule in this case. Sorcery is not necessarily, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will sometimes be docha sorcery, he'll sometimes conquer it, and sometimes he'll allow it to prevail. In which cases will he conquer it? In the places where we're dealing with someone who is nifish zechusei, who has a lot of merit to their name. In cases like that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to conquer the sorcery. In cases not like that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not going to conquer the sorcery. This seems to be the rule that the Gemara is trying to establish. Do you want to? Did you find the Gemara? Okay, so we'll go weiter, and if you have a kasha on me, we can sort it out. Okay. The hashtag Kamar HaMedrash. Now it seems fitting that the Medrash says, Heim hayu rotzim la'asos melchama. Now that we have this understanding, according to the Zera Shimshon, that they were dafka fighting against the Kadosh Baruch Hu with kshufim, with sorcery, now it seems appropriate to say that they were trying to wage war, that they were trying to be lasos melchama, that they were lasos melchama kalomar, bechoach kishufeim, with the strength of their sorcery.
It says here.
Gemara.
Yeah, the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Lam Yikrak Shafim. Why are they called Shafim? Shemachishim, because they contradict the upper legion.
Yeah.
But he says here, contradicting means it indicates that sort of can bring about someone's death, even if it was not decreed by heavenly. Right. But it doesn't necessarily mean that I just think that
like here's the idea, right? If Rabbi Chanina is saying Ein Od Milvado, it's like it doesn't matter what their sorcery says because a Kadosh Baruch Hu is going to say something different. But if you're going to say that the sorcery can say something that a Kadosh Baruch Hu doesn't say, as Ein Leolam Od Milvado, right? Or Ein Leolam Od Milvado. That's the idea, that the sorcery actually has a chance. And there are times where the sorcery is going to win. So in what cases will it not win? The Nafshi Zechus say in a case where the person that you're dealing with has a lot of merit, like Rabbi Chanina, who had a lot of merit, and therefore the sorcery didn't win. We understand? Yeah. The hashtag Kamar HaMedrash. Now the Medrash can say, Hem hayu rotzim lasos melchama. Now we can say that the Dora Flaga, or at least that particular kita, the Dora Flaga, wanted to lasos melchama. They wanted to do battle against Hashem. Why? Kilomar bechoach kishufeim, because with the strength of their sorcery, leavi aleim shefa berov tova af neged ritzanos el Kadosh Baruch Hu. Because they were going to use their sorcery, they were going to bring down shefa tova bracha aleim, even if a Kadosh Baruch Hu didn't want it that way. And we can understand that sometimes sorcery wins over HaKadosh Baruch Hu and that they may actually have succeeded. But here's the thing, the Gemara says that the only time that sorcery won't succeed is in a case of the Nefesh Zechuse, right? So what exactly was it that they were being lasos melchama about? Lo hayu maminim shebizman she'ein retzono shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu bechach afilu hakeshufim ein lahem shum koach. The war that they were waging was this very Gemara that says that if a Kadosh Baruch Hu wants the sorcery to succeed, it will. And if he doesn't want the sorcery to succeed, then it won't. So they're saying, no, even in cases where a Kadosh Baruch Hu doesn't want the sorcery to succeed, the sorcery still wins. That's the war they were waging, right? You see the machlokas between them now. They've got their sorcery, and they say, our sorcery can conquer heaven. And heaven says, your sorcery can't conquer heaven. And now there's a machlokas. So now they can actually go up and wage war. We see clearly who the losers are in this case, right? The monkeys walk away defeated, and also the Shadim and the Lilin. But we actually see now what the svara was behind their actively going out and trying to wage war against the Kadosh Baruch Hu, is they thought they had a winning shot, because Kshufim sometimes beats over Shemayim. And now we see what the proof was that they brought, and we're going to answer the first, the second. No, hold on. No, we're going to answer actually both of our questions in one shot. Why is it that they brought Avraham Avinu and HaKadosh Baruch Hu in one go, all together? And why did they call Avraham Avinu a barren mule, a pir de akara, right? They brought a proof for themselves. Shehare Abraham pir de akara, because Avraham Avinu is a pir de akara. What does that mean? What are they trying to say? She'afal pi shehu tzaddik, because even though he's a tzaddik, and as a matter of fact, he was the only tzaddik in that door, and certainly we would describe him as being nefish tzechusei, we would say that he's got much merit to his name, like Rabbi Chanina. Vayirei Elohim, and he was a God-fearing person. Ein lo koach laheitiv lo. HaKadosh Baruch Hu seemingly did not have the power to bless him with children. And for sure, he's not going to be able to conquer over sorcery. If by a person with merit you can't overturn their mazel, then, seemingly in a case where somebody doesn't have merit, then for sure you're not going to be able to overturn their mazel. Because we've seen that the case where you're able to overcome sorcery is nefesh zechusei. If a person is not nefesh zechusei, then you're not going to be able to help them. Avraham Avinu is nefesh zechusei, you can't help him. So sorcery is le'olam is going to conquer. That's their raya, and that's why they bring Avraham Avinu with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, and that's why they call him a pir da'akara. Because dafka, I don't know. I'll say, and it's a shaila, it's not a kasha. I don't know why they dafka call him a pirda. Why dafka a mule, as opposed to just saying like Avraham Avinu hu akara?
A mule is barren.
What do you mean?
A mule is a combination of a mule
Donkey and
a
a
donkey and a
horse.
horse. Yes.
What is it? What you can't breed two mules? Why?
No, you can't. That would
Why?
be- I think the whole point is a mule
they
itself.
become barren. Yeah.
Yeah, they become barren. I think that by default they're barren.
Is this what is it like? Is there a riot for? Like, I've never heard this before.
No, I'm saying.
Is
like,
there a
Is it
makor? Is it
a
just a
don-
gula?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's
it's
a
a
makor.
makor.
Yeah. I'm saying a mule in and of itself.
It's a
is-
famous example of.
Yeah, a mule in and of itself is
okay.
barren. Therefore, it's not like the whole point is that a donkey can have children. A mule cannot.
Interesting. Okay, but then I would ask. So then why dafka? Peri the kara? Why not just call him parid? Because if a kara is mashma, then you don't need to say both. Whatever. It's just a question. But it's very interesting. I wasn't familiar with that particular point.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So what do we say? HaKadosh Baruch Hu leolam, you can't conquer over kshufim. How do we know? Because Avraham Avinu is a tzaddik, right? He's nefesh zechusei. And you're not able to be a meitiv lo. You can't give him children. You can't give him progeny. Right? In a case where he's not nefesh zechusei. Say again?
Google says mules are by default usually infertile.
Wow, Google said that?
Yeah.
Hey, look at Google.
But it's
It
from
says
the Torah.
Wikipedia. It's not like some stuff.
Yeah.
Wikipedia. Jews.
We control the media. Don't take me
Except
out of
that story with the hospital.
Okay.
Anyway.
Weiter. Right? Because in a case where ordinarily a Kadosh Baruch Hu wouldn't be able to overcome sorcery, but because someone is nefesh zechusei, he would be able to overcome sorcery. But Avraham Avinu is nefesh zechusei and he can't overcome sorcery. So in all other cases, for sure, he can't overcome sorcery. Mishum hachi, because we understand this. Mida keneged nida nasu shedim kufin v'chulei. Because they made this argument that a Kadosh Baruch Hu wouldn't be able to conquer over sorcery in all those cases. So then they were turned into monkeys and demons and whatnot. Why is it fitting that they were dafka doing divarim achadim, right, on HaKadosh Baruch Hu's oneness? Dehainu al einod malvado, because the whole root of their argument was on this idea of einod malvado. They're saying, no, really, there is besides him. There's kshufim. And so they're protesting on HaKadosh Baruch Hu's oneness, and that's why it's divarim achadim, because the whole idea is, no, there's sorcery, right? And so for that reason they were punished. Alavraham shechaya akar lefi shemazalo hayakach ve'ein lo koach az v'shalom lishanot hamazol. And the raya that they bring is that Avraham Avinu, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, chaz v'shalom, that we're saying this, this is their argument, not ours, couldn't change his mazel, right? And therefore, for that reason, they were turned into monkeys and demons and whatnot.
But they're using Avraham as opposed to Avram. Like if they would have said Avram, doesn't. Because Avram, at the point of Avraham already,
Why does the Medrash call him Avraham?
Right.
It's a good question.
I mean, of course, we know that the Gemara says anyone calls Avram, right? We know that the Gemara says that, but even so,
what does the Gemara say?
The Gemara says anyone calls
Avram.
Right, he gets
End of parrot, first paragraph.
Yeah, he says
Abraham. Anyone who calls Abraham Avram.
Yeah, I think it's like something like I forgot what he says. Something about it's like something negative. I forgot what it is exactly.
Right. So it could just be that the Tana of the Mishnah of the Medrash knew that the Dor Haflaga would call him Avram,
right?
But he didn't want to write Avram,
right?
So he wrote
Zera
Avraham.
Shimshon.
No, the Tana of the Medrash. The Tana of the Medrash.
The Medrash didn't want to say Avram, even though that's probably what they would have.
Could be.
Yeah.
Could be. I don't know. Good point, though. Okay. All right. So up to now, we've had a pretty straightforward drasha as far as the Zera Shimshon is concerned. Now, these last few paragraphs get very, very Kabbalistic.
Right. Very
Kabbalistic. And we're going to do our best with them. But they're mamish, like it's deep in Yanim. And it should dafka be in the merit that the panemius of our current matzav, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, should be completely and totally destroying our enemies, because we're going to talk about like El Acher, we're going to talk about klipas, we're going to talk about destructive forces in the world. And B'ezrat Hashem, the destructive forces that are causing our current matzav, HaKadosh Baruch Hu should be totally and completely shofet over them. You should destroy them completely, shofet them legamri.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Amnam. However, Kedei lidakdek lashon devarim chadim. So a lot of, like, for the vast majority of this, we've been talking about this inyan of devarim achadim, right? Al achadim, on the oneness. And devarim chadim is sharp words. It's literally what it means. But these words really haven't been sharp enough to be called sharp. Why is that? Because the point that the Dora Flaga, the Kita of the Dora Flaga that says Lasas Milchama, the point that they're making is HaKadosh Baruch Hu is never going to succeed over sorcery. And the point that the Gemara is making is, no, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is sometimes going to succeed over sorcery. So it's not Devarim Chadim. What we want to see from Devarim Chadim is never and always. But what we see is never and sometimes. It's not sharp enough that it should be sharp. We're going to get sharp, don't you worry. Amnam, kedei legdagdek lashon Devarim Chadim. In order to look into this idea of Devarim Chadim, what does it really mean that they spoke sharp words? Umahim elu Devarim Chadim. What were the sharp words? Yesh lomar dis. In the Zohar, we see in Parshat Mishpatim, Kaimer, the following: the El Acher Istares de lo Aved Perin, that the foreign gods, alien gods, were infertile and could not be fruitful and multiply. That's what the Zohar says in Parshat Mishpatim. The Ein Perusha b'Sefer Adam Yasher b'Drush HaKlipas, and the Adam Yasher Rav Chaim Vital is going to give over a perush on that the Zera Shimshon isn't bringing now, and I have not looked into. Although B'ezrat Hashem, it should be extracurricular learning for us all. Adam Yashar b'Drush Klipas Drush Beis. Ve'alze Pershu lanu hamikubalim. So the Mikubalim explain a verse in Devarim. Lo yibecha akar ve'akara. There's not going to be to you a barren male or a barren female. Pshat, that's going on the Kehillah Yisrael. But the Mikubalim explain kacha. Dehainu hazachar be'anefkeva shel haklipa lo yiyu lehara lecha. That the evil forces are not going to be able to do bad to you and make you barren. Shegam hi nikreis el novelis alea, which is a puzzle from Yeshayahu. Yeshaya that's talking about like a barren elm tree or something like that, right? And it's basically saying along the line, they're not going to be able to make you barren, is how the Mikubalim are explaining it. Which is this idea in the Zohar that's brought about that the foreign gods are infertile. Okay, very deep concepts. We're kind of just scratching the surface here, yeah? This is what the Dora HaFlag is really trying to say here. These are the Devarim Chadim, and it's really Harif. Lomar. Atem omrim ki el acher istares de lo eved perin. You guys say, like in the Zohar, that the foreign gods, the forces of Tuma, are infertile and that they don't produce fruits. Veheim hayu omrim chaz v'shalom adraba. And they said, God forbid, that we should believe this and that we should give this any credit at all whatsoever. But their argument was adraba beharaya. What's adraba? That leolam, the forces of Tuma are fertile, and the forces of Tahara, of Kedusha, are infertile and cannot be fruitful and multiply. The Haraya, and what's their proof? She'avraham pirda akara. That Abraham Avinu was a barren mule. Vehu tzadik echad ba'olam, and he was the only tzaddik in the world. He was mamish the definition of Kedusha. Ve'im kain, hatuma para ve'rava ve'loha Kedusha, chaz v'shalom. If even Abraham Avinu, who's a tzaddik, who's Kedusha mamish in his generation, is the only person who can be called kadosh, who can be called tzaddik, and if even he is barren, then for sure anyone below him in Kedusha, which is everyone, would also be called barren, and therefore you're forced to say that really le'olam, the forces of Tahar are barren, and the forces of Tuma are chaz v'shalom, that we should say this and give this credence. They're the ones that are fruitful, and they're the ones that multiply, and they're the ones that are fertile. V'zeu devarim chadim, shahayu be'emes chadin. These are the real words that are sharp. Why? Because they directly contradict reality. What do we know reality to be? That le'olam tahor is fertile, le'olam kodesh is fertile. This we know. And they're saying the direct opposite. They're saying, no, tahor is infertile, chaz v'shalom, and tuma is fertile, chaz v'shalom. These are the devarim chadim. V'lachein, mechamas hatam harishon, she'ein lo koach neged hakishufim. And for this reason, right, because of this, we see that their first reason that the sorcery triumphs over HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? Ve'af mechamas ta'am hasheni she'eino ose peiros, chaz v'shalom. And also for the second reason, right, that Kedusha does not produce fertility, that it doesn't produce fruits. God forbid that we should say and believe that. Hayu omrim lo kol heimenu sheyavor lo ha'elyonim she'eino roi lecha chalila b'chaz. This is why they say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu shouldn't, like, who's he to decide that he should get the upper realms? Yeah? Because he can't triumph over sorcery, and because he's the forces of Tahir and Kaddish, but he's not fertile, according to the argument we made, Chaz v'shalom, that we should give this any credence and any credit. That's why they wanted to go and wage war on him, to take it away from him. Because it's not fitting for him, God forbid, that we should ever say this in believers. And from this we see, Mida keneged Mida. What is it, the punishment that they got? Because they said they wanted to go and take the upper worlds. Like HaKadosh Baruch Hu isn't fitting to the upper worlds. So Mida keneged Mida, Nasu kufin b'sheidim v'chulei, she'einam lo minha elyonim v'lo min ha'tachtonim, that they weren't fitting for the upper worlds, and they also weren't fitting for the lower worlds. Because they tried to strive for the upper worlds, they said, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you're not fitting for the upper world, Chaz v'shalom, you're not fitting for the upper world. So they weren't fitting for the upper world or for the lower world, and therefore HaKadosh Baruch Hu was able to be moried them to a lower place, right? Whereas we said earlier, they can't be mashlim themselves. So in light of everything that's going on right now, where we're seeing such horrific, violent, and evil figures rising up in our midst to do evil against us, dafka set on our destruction, and I would go so far as to say that their goal is lasos melchama, to do battle against Shemayim, against the bris, against Kadosh Baruch Hu and Am Yisrael. So Bezrat Hashem, they should be lowered to places of being kufin, shedim, lilin, the lowest possible place where they can't be mashlim themselves to be anashim. And we should Bezrat Hashem see ourselves redeemed. We should see all of our chayalim and doshim and all of our talmidei chachamim and everyone all over the world continue with the Achdus Yisrael, this unprecedented, just as we've seen unprecedented evil and violence, we've also seen unprecedented good and unity and avas chinam, avas Yisrael amiti. Mizrat Hashem, that should only continue, it should grow. And Mizrat Hashem, when we're out of this matziv, we should keep that, we should mamish, nurture it and help it become flourishing throughout the whole world for the rest of time, so that everyone can know v'yadaza yom shevet al-babacha ki Hashem ulakim ein od milvado legamre.
Good share.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mordechai, for coming. Thank you, Reb Larry.
Yes.
And say a good book and Shavuot Tov, and send your Yeshuas. Send your names. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Charles. I miss you.